11. This is Jason, and as always with me, Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, how are you doing?
Jason, I'm doing well, man. I'm I don't know. Okay, so we're 3 chapters in, right? To Kristin Lavransdatter. I don't know what kind of impact this has had on you so far, but I find myself talking about this book, like just randomly, like, oh, what you reading over there? Oh, cool. Have you read this book? It's apparently one of the greatest Catholic novels of all time, and just a few chapters in, pretty solid.
Well, the last 2 weeks have been holding your breath, waiting for the shoe to drop, and boy, did it ever in this
Oh,
chapter.
I so would have loved a Christmas episode.
A Christmas episode?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm with you now. Yeah, we were a little off in our predictions.
Oh man, there's no way we could have seen that coming.
No. I mean, right from the get-go, right? Like, oh, by the way, Ragenfred's pregnant.
It just zooms a few years into the future
and has a baby.
and is radically different.
I mean, I just assumed that she was done having children. I mean, then again, I remember in chapter 1 they were telling Ragenfred like, "Oh, don't worry, like you're still young. You're still childbearing years, so you still have a chance." But I didn't think she was going to have another child, so
No, I really thought Kristin was going to be an only child, and still maybe.
we'll see. But Ragenfred and Lavran have another baby girl named Ulvild.
Yeah, Ulfhild. Yep,
I don't know if the H is silent or not.
I have no idea.
And she is just the best at everything.
And the great thing about her being the best at everything is that she lifts everyone up. Her presence just brightens everyone's day. Like, even it said that even Kristin did not notice the lack of attention she received, or the diminished attention that, whatever, the amount of attention had decreased for her, right? Because another kid had come along. She didn't notice that because of the amount of love that she had for Ulfhild, right? Just she loved to play with her and dote on her, and once
To an extent, though, as we learn later near the end of the chapter.
well, I mean,
You're right. Like, yes, it does say that, but I'm saying that jokingly because as much as you know, with kids, seeing your younger kids play, like at times they love each other so much and
yeah.
they get along. But if you're trying to take their toys,
Oh, sure. Yeah. That's, there's a little bit of territorial, little boundary there, but otherwise everything is good to go. And especially, and again, you've seen this, once that second child, or younger child starts to be able to communicate, and move around and start to walk, and like, oh my gosh, things really take off.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah. Also for Ragnfrid, so her whole disposition changes. It says that she nurses Ulfhild for well into 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Lavrans had never seen, or his wife more beautiful or more joyful, and I loved. Let me find it real quick. It's kind of towards the beginning. Let's see. It said something to the effect that Kristin didn't really realize the disposition of her mom, right? Like, she just figured, like, this is just how my mom is, and it's with Ulfhild's presence that she's like, oh, there's something different, And even she appreciated that.
Yeah, like her mother was the disciplinarian and her father was the jokester and the nice one kind of thing. And now they're both being nice to me and loving to me
Mm-hmm.
and caressing those subtle caresses on my face that my mother never did before Uvild came along. And as she said very succinctly, those 3 years, those first 3 years with the new sister were some of the best. And then came Whitsuntide of the third year.
Old Whitsuntide.
Bum bum bum. We are then introduced to Ragenfried's some of Ragenfried's family, from her brother and his wife and their kids, and they come to visit Lavran and their family, and sadly there is an incident with some lumber and an ox and the children.
Yeah, yeah. So they're outside playing, and a man comes walking across, I suppose, into the area where they are, the courtyard, the barn, wherever, kind of close to where they are. And as he's trying to, I suppose, put the ox into the barn, the ox breaks away from the man and heads towards this family that's been playing. Trond, the brother of Ragnfried, and the children. And so Trond, he reacts, I mean, the way that any dad should or would. His mindset is here on saving the kids. So he grabs Oldfield, who's been holding. He grabs his youngest, and he avoids the danger. And the tough thing here is that the way, or the only way he could avoid the danger, was by getting up onto this, I suppose, stack or pile of logs, which doesn't seem to be the most stable of choices. But in that moment, you're not thinking that way. You're thinking, I gotta get away from this ox.
And the reason why Trond is down with the kids was because right before that, the kids are playing, and one of them hurts Uvild, and Uvild goes, or Trond goes down to reprimand his one of his boys, and it was interesting how it was said that even Trond was very affectionate to Uvild, even though he wasn't that great around kids. It seems like a very typical like uncle kind of thing, answer there, where some uncles are maybe not so great around kids, while others are very comfortable around kids. And so that's where, like you said, he's picking her up. So he already has her in his arms when the ox is charging. So he's trying to hold on to Uvild in his arms, while in his other hand, he's dragging his other son, one of his boys, trying to get up this logs.
How different is this whole scenario? I mean, if one of his boys doesn't hurt Ulfield, right? Because the parents are up in this loft area, just visiting, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is like happens all the time, right? A family comes over to visit. Parents are in the kitchen or in the house. Kids are in another part of the house or outside playing. It's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, they're
up in the loft, they're visiting. Kids are outside playing, and it's only because he hears the tears of Ulfield. He's like, okay, I know my boys did something, and he goes down to check it out. And
which one of my boys hurt you?
Had that not happened, like, oh my gosh, this could have gone so much worse.
And like you're saying, unfortunately, when he jumped on the pile of rocks, or the pile of timber, he loses his grip with Uvild, and so Uvild falls down, starts tumbling down the hill, if you will, as well as one of the timbers is also falling at this fast behind her. And so when she finally settles, the log falls on top of her back. And of course, we're fearing the worst. And by that point, Lavran he's finally down there as well, tackling this ox with his bare hands, and doing everything he can. I think there was one point where he grabs it by the snout, if I remember
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So Laverne, his focus is on Oathfield. So he's trying to lift that log
Right,
off
right.
of her, and the ox sees him and just starts charging after him. And so now it's survival, right? He tries to grab it by the horns, but he gets knocked off and kind of ripped up a little bit, and he's just grabbing a hold of whatever he can grab a hold of. And so ultimately he does grab a hold of its nostrils and try to pull himself up and just keep the ox at bay. And then thankfully Trond is able to get there. Some other men are able to get there, and finally they're able to harness this just wild animal.
Mm-hmm. And at this time too, Ragenfried's down there. She's doing everything she can to try and get this log off Ufield, and they finally do. And Ragenfield starts just saying, "Oh, thank God, Ufield is still alive." And so they're trying to, get Ufield back inside, get her to a safe place. Lavern's trying to, get up, but he's been badly bruised, beaten, and bloodied by this ox, and he's trying to call orders out. He's worried not about himself but of Uvild, and so he's telling people, go get the priest, go down and get the medicine doctor downtown, or further down in a smaller village.
The wise woman.
The wise woman. And just trying to order, but he's also just he's grayish white. He's lost a lot of blood, and he's then he goes ham.
He's fading fast, but he does one last little burst of energy here, where he grabs the axe and goes back to the ox and just goes off on him, right? Just starts pounding away right into the skull of the ox until there's, what does it say? There's blood and brains splattered everywhere. Yeah.
And then he finally falls to the ground, and he gets helped back into his quarters, into his home. And then
at this moment, just pause real quick.
Yeah.
At this moment, what are you thinking?
I was honestly thinking I wouldn't be shocked if this is where Lavrin dies.
I totally was too. I thought, so when they said, "Oh, thank God she's alive," about Ulfield, and yeah, she's hurt, but she's alive.
Well, and
I thought,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish your thought, and then I'll say.
I was going to say, I thought, okay, so this is the father laying his life down for the child, right here. That the daughter is going to live, and this is, I mean, it's not looking good for Lavrans. Like, he's losing tons of blood. He's ripped up, beaten up.
Can barely stand on his feet.
Can barely stand on his feet. The color is going away from his skin. It really, I thought so too. It really seems like this is this guy that's been built up over the last couple of chapters, and we're about to lose him.
And we're children of Disney films, so a parent has to die early on in the story.
A parent, Mufasa. Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm like reading this, like just dreading in my gut, like, oh no,
so
this is it for him.
So you'll get a kick out of this. So I know I'd mentioned when we started reading this book that, my wife already had this book and she's been wanting to read it. She hasn't read it. And I thought, oh, it'd be nice to maybe read this together, and I'll read it out loud to her. So I caught her up. I just gave her the cliff notes of chapters 1 and 2. And so this is the first chapter she's hearing. And
Which have been sweet chapters.
I know. I told her, I said,
chapter
you see
2,
some magical.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I told her, I was like, yeah, it's been really light and it's been great. And then we started, and she's like, what did you get me into? But it was, I was going to say earlier, it was a miracle also, to backtrack real quick. It was a miracle that Ufield is alive, because we find out that the log landed on, like, one end landed on a rock and the other didn't. So basically it was on top of her, but not the entire weight of the
Right.
limber was on top of her.
Right.
So that's
Right.
why she was still basically
Which is
alive.
totally why I thought she was going to be like, oh, okay, she was spared miraculously by this rock, and and so she's hurt, but she's going to be fine. It's Lavrans though that it is not looking good for her. So I just, like, halfway in or however far in, I'm like, oh man, this is how this book's going to go. Oh, okay, sorry,
No,
unpause.
you're fine. You're fine. So then we get into, they're in the room, and we we get it from Kristen's perspective. So Kristen, basically, she kind of sneaks in. Well, she goes in there, and then they tell her, "You need to leave. You need to go. You need to go away. You need to go to the neighbor's house." Well, she doesn't. She stays behind, and people are just so worried about Uvild and Lavrin that they just kind of lose sight of her. So she's like crept behind the headboard, and she's hiding there. So she doesn't do much through much of this. She's just hiding, and we're hearing it from that perspective. And during this time, they have Uvild laying on the bed, not really doing a whole lot other than Ragfried occasionally putting some damp cloths on her, but they don't want to touch her until she can be examined, because they don't want to do any more harm than there could already be. And your heart just breaks, and your stomach is wrenching, because there's nothing you can do, and she's just constantly whimpering and
Yeah,
crying out for help,
yeah.
and they can't do anything right now.
I mean,
And
even in the movement
helplessness.
from the field to the bed, it said that she was just in pain from that. So yeah, no, they definitely don't want to do anything to exacerbate the issue there. And if, as you can imagine, the parents are just overcome with grief. Ragfried in
I
particular,
was gonna say,
she's
mostly Ragfrey she's
really taking it
gone.
tough. She is, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, she's lost 3 boys before we've gotten to Kristen, and just the toll that has taken upon her. And now Kristen, and now, okay, good, now Ulfield, okay, so now, like, children once again, and just the life, the joy, the energy, everything that comes with that. And here's this, new chance, I suppose, to be a mother to multiple children, and then for it to go bad like this. She has really internalized a lot of this. She really thinks that this is her fault in some weird way. It's not rational, but this is not a rational moment. This is highly emotional and adrenaline fueled, and so she's screaming, "Don't touch me!" to Lavrans, who's trying to comfort her, even from his bed. "I'm worthless. You should strike me dead. There will never be an end to the misfortune I bring upon you." And he's trying to say, "Listen, no, you didn't do this. It's okay." And then she lashes out a little bit at her brother Trond in this weird passive aggressive way, right? Because Trond's like, she means it's me, by talking about it, and she doesn't deny it. She's just like, Trond knows what I mean, and she shoots him a look, like, wow, this is a tough situation for everybody. I don't think Trond feels awesome about what's happened here, and not that even it was his fault.
Right.
Even though it was him that was holding Oldfield, and Oldfield fell from his arms, right? Even still, like I said earlier on, had they not heard her cry, had Tron not gone down, that crazy ox would have just torn these kids apart. Like, it would have been just terrible. I mean, it already is bad. It would have been so much worse.
And so basically Ragenfried in her grief, but she's also what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my gosh, I just lost it. Desperate. That's the word I'm looking for.
Desperate,
She
desperate and delirious.
Yes, but she like we said though, because she feels, not only does she feel hopeless, she also feels, you see the raw sense of worthlessness she feels and how she views herself in the sight of God, which is, I God's not going to save me. I'm not savable. And so because I have all of these dark thoughts and all these dark feelings in my heart at times, and here it's bubbling over because of this raw emotion, and she taps into that dark place where she says, bring, I you know well, and because we also find out that, we called the priest, but the priest, we don't know where he's at right now, and we're still trying to fetch him. And so she's like, well, fine, then let's go get Fru Ashield. Now, who's Fru Ashield, Gabe?
Well, she is. When they said they were going to summon the wise woman, I imagine it's someone kind of like that, but not just like a village kind of nurse or doctor, but more specifically, kind of like a witch doctor or a
It's not more like a homeopathic kind of thing.
Yeah, but she's seen as this, I suppose, witch or sorceress of some type, not in relationship with God, but even at odds with God, and there's real concern with engaging with her, that when you do this, you are not just engaging with like, oh, here's someone who might have a solution, but rather with someone who might be utilizing or leaning on the power of like demonic power for any kind of benefit. So like you're not just going with it's not neutral, like you're going against God completely. And there's real concern here that this is the direction. But again, like you said, this is out of complete desperation. And even Kristin is like, this is strange. Like, what's going on? Like, it said that Kristin thought that her mother, who was otherwise constantly praying, should have called on God and the Virgin Mary instead. Like what is going on? Like, Mom, all this stuff that you've taught me, all the stuff that I've seen growing up, like this is what we should be doing. And obviously she's not saying anything. She's tucked away in a corner. But this is what we should be doing. And so even she herself is trying to pray now in the chaos of the moment. She's having a hard time. It's difficult. But even she is trying to like live out this model that she's seen growing up as a child, that even she still is a child, but that she has seen growing up.
And we also, I mean, for Kristin, we also see she admits that while it is difficult for her to not understand why her mother's not calling upon God and the Virgin Mary and other people, she's having a difficult time too, because there's just things happening so fast and such an emergency moment. It's hard to really think of anything and kind of get that tunnel vision going.
Yeah.
But
it's got to be a super scary time. I mean, think about it. Like through the eyes of Kristin here, like you're out playing with these cousins of yours, right? These two boys, and it's you and your sister, and like kids get a little rough, and whatever. Little Hild's crying, but now all of a sudden there's this ox that's charging at us, and it says that Trond was trying to grab Ulfhild and his youngest. So I would presume like Kristin's old enough she can try and move out of the way, and the other son is too. And so I mean, already how terrifying that is. I'm just trying to like find a place to escape, right? Just the craziness of that moment, and then to see what happens to your sister, to your dad, and now like in the blink of an eye, just to have this really fun, sweet moment where you're outside playing, like super innocent, to half of my family may not make it. Oh.
So we move to the part that I was talking about earlier. Ragnfield just feeling the weight of her guilt and shame and putting all these problems on her, just saying, any bad thing that's happening to our family is a result of my past sins and my evil ways and everything else. And there's a really good comment that the priest makes here in a little bit. But speaking of the priest busts through the door and exclaims, "God help those in this house," and begins to do his work and begins to pray over both of them, murmuring things in Latin as Kristen's kind of hearing from her spot. And she thought, Father's eyes, would find her and say, "Get out of here," kind of thing. But he doesn't. He's focused right now on Lavran and Ufield, and finds out that basically Lavran has 2 broken ribs and a punctured lung. And the priest just says, thankfully that's all you have as far as damage, which I'm like, oh man. If you're like, man, you got off easier. You have 2 broken ribs and a punctured lung. Ugh, that sounds awful.
Yeah, no, not fun at all. I was a little bit impressed here, like with the role. Okay, so when they said let's send for the priest, I'm like, okay, for prayer, for blessing, for comfort,
anointing.
Yeah, sure, all those things. Anointing, yeah, all those things. Also, it seems like priest is a little bit of a physician of sorts, right?
At least
it looks like old Sir Eric. Yeah, he's got some kind of knowledge of how to help people in situations like this, and maybe not doctor per se, but perhaps maybe one of the closest things that they have, which is another reason for him.
And so he tells, obviously Lavran doesn't care about himself right here. He's like, okay, yeah. What about my daughter? And Father says, well, I still need to examine her, but you need to go away and rest, which was a really nice way of telling him, I don't want to give you the bad news right now because it could be really, really bad. So you need to just go rest and try to recuperate. So Lavran goes away. So it's now the priest and Ragenfried. And, Ragenfried's trying to pull out anything from Father and just basically saying, just give me the bad news. Just rip the Band-Aid off and tell me that this isn't going to be, that she's not going to be okay, rather than just being silent here. And Father, does have to give her some sobering news here.
Yeah. Again, leaning on his faith. He says, I don't know that there's anything more for us to do. Her back is so badly injured. All we can do is let God and St. Olaf prevail. Not much more than that. Again, God, yes, but we see the devotion to saints, in particular St. Olaf, that this community has. So she's again saying, out of desperation, we got to pray. We'll give anything. You got to make God do this miracle. She's just not thinking straight. This is an adrenaline fueled, delirious mother, completely desperate, and that's what's happening here. And there's this conversation about miracles, and the priest says, well, it would take a miracle, and she retorts to him, well, aren't you always talking about miracles? Why couldn't this happen here?
And Father, they have a conversation, but basically Father later on, he kind of shuts her down later on when Father, shaking his head, says, you want nothing more from all your prayers and fasting than to force your will on God. Does it surprise you then that it has accomplished so little good? Because his whole thing is like, yes, miracles do happen, and we can and I will pray with all my might, and we all should for a miracle here. But we also must be willing and open to God, whatever God is willing for this child and for your family. And you need to accept that, whatever that is. And you are treating God like this magic genie ATM machine, the prosperity gospel, as we all, it's nothing new under the sun, where I'm doing all these fasting, I'm praying all these rosaries, and I'm doing all these sacrifices, God. Why aren't you giving me what I want?
Yeah. It's this barter she's trying to make with God, and say, look what I'm doing for you. You got to do this for me. Father Eric, what's the deal here? We got to make this happen. And so again, out of just spite almost, she replies back to what he just told her, what you just shared, that if God won't help her, then I will seek the aid of Fru Ashield or offer myself up to the devil if he will help.
And Father, you could, he's filling the room here, and he's just like, look, okay, she is highly emotional right now, and rightly so. I mean, her daughter is fighting for her life right now, and she is just delirious, like you were saying, and she's desperate. So she's going to say and do anything right now. Is it really going to be any fruitful for me to continue on and engage in this conversation? And clearly the answer is no, it's not. So he just says, okay, if that's what you want to do. He just restrains himself, and he said, but while you're waiting for her, your daughter's hands and feet are cold, so you may want to heat up, basically have like a heating pad, heat up some pots of water and put it next to her to kind of keep her extremities warm and the blood circulating in there.
Yeah. Yep. And as she gets up to go get the water, still she begs for his prayers.
And then we go ahead.
We're coming to the end close here, but basically it's about the time where Kristin gets discovered, gets sent away, and I guess the priest, does he stay, or at some point he leave? No.
Yeah, he left. Yeah, because like you said, right when Ragenfried asked for his prayer, pray for us nonetheless, Sir Eric. So a little while later, her mother came back with Tortoise. The priest and the women bustled around Uvild, and then Kristin was discovered and sent away. And then, boom, there's a slight pause here, and then
as she goes outside,
goes outside in the courtyard, and we get beautiful description of the scenery here.
100%, and didn't mind it.
No,
honestly,
it was a good, just like,
because it was a great break.
Yes, after such
a breath of air.
Yes. And, she very much like a child is thinking about her toys and how she's so protective. And she's been, ever since Uvild has started becoming a liking to some of her toys, Kristin had been hiding them, stashing them away. And she was just kind of saying, okay, well, if my sister gets well, I would be happy to give her anything and everything, all my toys to her, if that's, if she can get through this. And that brought her comfort, even just a little bit.
Yeah. And speaking of comfort, she thinks about the monk at Hamar, and she thinks about
some deep thoughts.
How he would have been convinced that miracles could happen, because the topic of miracle, of course, she has just heard this conversation with Father Eric and her mom, and just how coming to grips with how people can have such just different points of view, and people of goodwill, right? Not like, oh, well, these are good people, these are bad people. Of course, they have different thoughts, but even good people can disagree so vehemently on major important things, and just really, really wrestling with that reality.
Yep. She suddenly realized that they too thought differently about many things. And it's interesting, I can agree with that to an extent. I mean, obviously, as far as having difference of opinions, but I think her being a child, I bet if you put Brother Edvin and Father in a room together and you had them talk about that, I think they would both kind of come to the same conclusion here.
Sure. One might just be a little bit more optimistic than the other.
Sure.
But
So,
yeah. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, yeah.
Like, I mean, obviously, like the doctrine and the, belief in miracles, they both would agree on. One is
Yes,
just,
for sure.
maybe a little bit more, I guess, I would hate to say battle hardened, like you have a priest that's in the field dealing with this stuff probably on a much more regular basis and understanding the day to day aspects versus, the religious brother who is just pouring his heart out for the act of a miracle to happen, and that the almost certainty and gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Just the resolute belief that it not only can happen but would happen or will happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. So she ends up spending the night with Tortoise and her family, and just tough, uncomfortable. It's a strange place, strange noises. She's not used to, just everything is weird about it. And she ends up crying herself to sleep. And what a tough night. And then she wakes up the next morning to find out that her uncle has left Jorngard. His whole family has left after feeling like he's been completely blamed. Poor Trond, feels completely blamed for this whole incident. Has left in anger and, called his sister a crazy, demented woman. And then had some words for Lavrans as well. And this is where, on reflecting upon this, that Kristin's like, maybe my mom is different. Maybe there's something different about, because this is normal for her, right? Like, this is her. It said it earlier on. She didn't realize her mom was different or somber or whatever. It's just, this is the norm, and so she's kind of accepted that. But now she's starting to wonder, maybe she is different.
And at that moment, a maidservant came over to Kristin and said, "Hey, you need to go over to your dad's room." And so she goes up to the loft where her dad is, but it's not just her dad that's in the room. She immediately sees the witch. No, sees Fru Ashfield, and Fru, again, love the description here to paint the picture of what she looks like. Someone that is very small, childlike, but very old, but has very childlike features as far as the smoothness and the stature, and even a little bit, it seemed like in her speech and in how she would talk, but clearly an old lady.
Yeah. Yeah. And so she's eating. Ragfried is kind of tending to her a little bit. And then Fru calls Kristin over and compliments Ragfried. And again, description, the wrinkles, the skin, just the whole vibe of this woman.
And we also find out that, we have a little bit more set on Kristin's age at this time of the story is probably around 10 or 11. And Fru is just basically saying, listen, I'll be able to help your youngest daughter. I'll be able to help Uvild out. But when I leave, you're going to need someone that is going to be able to help Uvild out. Especially with a lot of her injuries and just disabilities. And so let me take Kristin under my wing, so to speak, and just have her shadow me and learn the ropes and know what to do after I'm gone.
Yeah, and just as she's about to go do something there to help them, her dad calls her to his bed and just, I guess, to be with him. And she says, "You're going to get well soon, aren't you, Father?" And he says, "I'm not in danger. Much more serious for your sister." And that's kind of the end of their conversation. There's just a moment there before Kristin then goes back to be with her mother and Fru Ashield. And that's where we end.
And that's it. Ooh, doggy.
Oh, this was crazy, man. Like when I read this, my adrenaline was pumping, heart racing. Didn't know what was going to happen. Thought Lavrans was going to just die. We're going to see the end of Lavrans. Now it seems like we haven't seen the end of Lavrans. He's going to pull through, but what's going to go on with Ulfield? I mean, even in the conversation with Sirrah Eric, he said something like, I know we want a miracle and for her to live, but imagine what a tough life this is going to be for her to be forever affected by this, whether it be paralyzed or deformed or whatever, difficulties and struggles she's going to have for this. He's not advocating for, euthanasia or anything like that, but
right.
He's just saying, like, we can't be greedy here when we're asking for God's will to be done. What do you really mean?
And
want God's will to be done.
With Ragenfried, she also had that comment of Uvild's my favorite. Period.
Oh yeah.
Kristin who? And I mean,
which the moment, right? Like, what if this had happened to Kristin? You got to think Ulfield Ragenfried's still gonna have some kind of reaction, maybe not the same kind.
I was gonna say,
still some kind of.
I don't think so. Like the way things were set up, like, yeah, obviously she would be very distraught, but Ragenfried is just saying, like, if Ulfield dies, I will in my life, I'm done.
Yeah.
My heart's gonna break. I will die of a broken heart. Like, if she goes, I go, kind of thing. That's it. And
it's tough because she just started like loving again,
right? And that makes sense. She opened her heart. Exactly. She's opened her heart up for the last 3 years and has poured everything into her daughter instead of God. And now this is being taken from her.
Yeah.
And so, she's lashing out to anyone and everyone right now. And I think that, like, going back to what you were saying of like, oh, my mom's different from other women. And going back to also where she's like, why aren't you praying and things like that. And the conversation that father had with his mother of that, listen, you can do all the lip service you want, but do you really believe this? Meaning the faith. Like, we know Lavrin does. Lavrin has total faith. And I think Kristin, as a child, she believes, but she's also wrestling with this because she's now getting a different point of view of someone that she thought believed. But when push comes to shove now, she's realizing, oh, wait, maybe this was just all lip service. Does she really believe?
Well, and now she's interacting with this woman, right? This Fru Ashield, who is complimentary, is finding a role for her, is making her feel valued and important. Who knows what kind of impact this is going to ultimately have on Kristin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what type of impact, because we know she does not like her, Kristin, that is, does not like the witch doctor here, because everything, she was tense the entire time. She was like, waiting for her to come through that door, and while she was hiding, and just, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what type of interaction, and if Kristin's opinions, thoughts or feelings change as they have more conversations.
Looking forward to it, man. I'm ready for chapter 4.
Same as well. I am totally looking forward to this, and I hope y'all are too. Thank y'all so much for listening and for sharing this podcast. I was sharing with Gabe last week that like Gabe was saying, how people it's a classic and a lot of people really resonate with this book. Well, it sure shows, because a lot of you had downloaded specifically this when chapter 1 became available. It was like one of our top most downloaded first day downloads ever in our 3 years of being on this podcast. So it obviously is resonating. So if you're new to this podcast, welcome. Thank you so much for listening. And feel free to share this with your friends and family. And we also have this on YouTube as well. So if people don't have a podcast or don't want to use podcast players and they want to use YouTube in the background, just look up Reading Your Way to Heaven on YouTube and, share it with friends and family. Like I said, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in the next one. Love you. Bye.